November 22, 2003. The streets of Tbilisi buzz with an energy that will change Georgia forever. Tonight, 22 years ago, the Rose Revolution began a peaceful uprising that would topple a dictator and inspire democratic movements across the former Soviet Union. What started with roses would bloom into a new era. Georgian President Eduard Shevardnadze never imagined his regime would end with protesters bearing roses instead of bullets. For months, his government had grown increasingly corrupt and authoritarian. But the people of Georgia were about to show the world that sometimes the most powerful weapon is simple courage combined with unity. The Rose Revolution wasn't just about one man or one election. It was about a nation's thirst for democracy after decades of Soviet control. Georgia had regained independence in 1991, but true freedom remained elusive. The revolution would prove that the people could reclaim their destiny. To understand the Rose Revolution, we must first understand Georgia in the 1990s. After the Soviet collapse, this ancient nation struggled to build democratic institutions. Ethnic conflicts ravaged the regions of Abkhazia and South Ossetia, while economic hardship left millions in poverty. Shevardnadze, a former Soviet foreign minister, returned to Georgia in 1995, promising stability and prosperity. Initially welcomed as a savior, he gradually transformed from reformist leader to entrenched autocrat. Opposition parties faced harassment, media censorship tightened, and corruption flourished. By 2003, Georgians watched their dreams of democracy slip away. Youth unemployment soared, the economy stagnated, and basic freedoms eroded. Young people especially felt trapped in a system that offered no future. The stage was set for something extraordinary to happen. November 2, 2003. Parliamentary elections took place across Georgia. From the beginning, irregularities surfaced. Vote buying, intimidation, and ballot stuffing became commonplace. But this time, Georgians refused to remain silent. They documented everything with a new tool: digital cameras. Opposition leader Mikheil Saakashvili watched the fraudulent election unfold with growing determination. A young, Western-educated politician, he represented a new generation of Georgian leaders who believed their country deserved better. The election results would prove them right in an unexpected way. November 22nd. As official results announced Shevardnadze's victory, something incredible happened. Thousands of Georgians poured into Freedom Square in central Tbilisi. But instead of stones and Molotov cocktails, they carried roses. The symbolism was perfect: beauty against brutality, peace against violence. The protesters weren't just angry citizens, they were organized. Student groups, opposition parties, and civil society organizations had been planning for months. Social media, still in its infancy, helped coordinate the largest peaceful demonstration in Georgian history. The revolution would be broadcast live to the world. Shevardnadze's security forces faced an impossible choice. These weren't typical rioters, they were mothers, fathers, students, and professionals holding flowers. How do you violently suppress a peaceful protest without losing legitimacy? The government's hesitation would prove fatal. As the protests grew, television became the battleground. State-controlled media initially downplayed the demonstrations, but independent broadcasters showed the truth. Georgians watching at home saw their neighbors standing peacefully for freedom. Support for the protesters swelled across the country. November 23rd. Shevardnadze called an emergency meeting with his security chiefs. The army, police, and intelligence services all gave the same message: we won't attack our own people. Without force, the regime had no cards left to play. The dictator found himself truly alone. Meanwhile, in Freedom Square, something magical was happening. Strangers became friends, sharing food and stories. Artists performed, musicians played, and poets recited verses about liberty. The revolution had become a celebration of Georgian identity and democratic values. International media arrived, turning the Rose Revolution into a global story. CNN, BBC, and Al Jazeera all covered the peaceful protests. The contrast between Georgia's nonviolent revolution and typical post-Soviet conflicts couldn't have been clearer. This was democracy in action. November 24th. Shevardnadze made a fatal miscalculation. He appeared on state television, claiming the protests were illegal and threatening to restore order by force. But his threat rang hollow. Everyone knew he had no support left. The speech backfired spectacularly. That evening, something extraordinary happened. Television news anchors, no longer afraid of censorship, began reporting honestly about the protests. One by one, government officials resigned or publicly supported the demonstrators. The regime was collapsing from within. November 25th. The final act began. Saakashvili and thousands of supporters marched on parliament. Inside, Shevardnadze was meeting with his remaining allies, desperately trying to find a way out. Outside, the people sang traditional Georgian songs about freedom and independence. As protesters surrounded the parliament building, Shevardnadze's helicopter was ordered to land in the compound. The man who had ruled Georgia for 8 years was trapped. The revolution had succeeded through pure moral force, no violence, no bloodshed, just the unstoppable power of an awakened people. November 23rd, 2003, 7:15 p.m. Eduard Shevardnadze announced his resignation on live television. "I don't want to shed blood," he said simply. The Rose Revolution was complete. Georgia had achieved the impossible, a peaceful transfer of power in a region known for violent conflicts. The international community was amazed. Here was proof that peaceful revolution was possible in the post-Soviet world. The Rose Revolution inspired similar movements across Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Serbia's Otpor, Ukraine's Orange Revolution, and Kyrgyzstan's Tulip Revolution all borrowed tactics from Georgia. Mikheil Saakashvili became interim president, later elected in January 2004. His reforms aimed to root out corruption, strengthen democratic institutions, and integrate Georgia with the West. For a brief moment, Georgia seemed destined to become the region's democracy success story. But democracy proved more complex than revolution. Saakashvili's later years were marked by authoritarian tendencies and conflict with Russia over Georgia's territories. The Rose Revolution's ideals of freedom and rule of law sometimes got lost in practical politics. Democratic consolidation takes time. 22 years later, Georgia faces new challenges. Political polarization, Russian pressure, and unresolved conflicts in Abkhazia and South Ossetia continue to threaten stability. But the Rose Revolution's legacy ensures peaceful change is possible, and the people hold ultimate power. November 22nd, 2025. We remember the Rose Revolution not just as a historical event, but as proof that ordinary people can change history. In an era of authoritarian resurgence worldwide, Georgia's peaceful uprising reminds us that democracy requires constant vigilance and courage. The roses that bloomed in Tbilisi's Freedom Square 22 years ago carried a universal message. Hope is more powerful than fear, unity is stronger than oppression, and the desire for freedom can never be permanently suppressed. The Rose Revolution's light still shines for democracy seekers everywhere. As we reflect on this anniversary, let us remember that every democracy we enjoy today began with someone refusing to accept that's just how things are. The Rose Revolution teaches us that peaceful change is not only possible, it's inevitable when people demand their rights with courage and determination.